I grew up as, and still pretty much am, solely a Nintendo console fan, and there are plenty of reasons for why, but more often than not the biggest reasons of which was always the appeal factor. Gameplay and graphics are very important for sure, but something you could always depend upon with Nintendo titles in the Wii era was that they were almost always super charming and appealing as heck. Most were charming to me for similar reasons, be it a certain character type in the game, some expressive animations, or fun and colorful level theming, but another important factor in this is something that played a fairly big role to the Wii in general, acting as a mascot for the Wii era, the Miis. The Miis were introduced at E3 2007, and from there it was history. Miis would go on to appear in multiple Wii games and later on in the 3DS and Wii U as well, but as the move to the Switch happened, something changed. The Miis that were once thriving in the Wii era were starting to see much less usage than before, and they were already on a steady decline, but things weren't looking great. Today I want to talk about that. Miis, the Mii Maker, the games that Miis have been featured in over the years, and their importance to me. Well, let's not waste any time and dig in, shall we? I'm certain most of you already know what a Mii is. They were everywhere in the Wii era. Miis are these little avatars that you can customize as you see fit to create a lookalike for yourself, a friend, or be like me and learn how to speedrun making a Peter Griffin Mii. Why do I not have more friends? I've never been the most creatively driven guy, but there's something about creating a Mii that's just so relaxing. I think the Wii's sound design helps a lot with that too, hearing all the little clicky sounds as you hover over each button. I always loved hovering over a Wii's keyboard. Like, whoever was responsible for the sound effects, I seriously hope they got a big promotion for that. The original Mii Maker and Mii Plaza app in particular were something I remember spending a lot of time in. The Mii Maker gave you a ton of customization options to mess around with, and naturally, me being as young as I was, I kinda went nuts making as many Miis as possible. As far as I can remember at least, I have no clue how many of these my brothers made. Part of my inspiration for doing so was being able to see all of my Miis marching around in the Mii parade. There's just something really satisfying about watching your creations go off and wander about together. My other inspiration would have to go to the Wii series of games though. The Wii series titles solely revolve around the Mii characters, so you'll see a lot of pre-made Miis everywhere in the foreground and the background, but the cool thing is, if you have extra Miis in your plaza apart from the Mii you're playing as, most Wii series games will take those extra Miis and throw them in the background. It was cool enough to see a couple of Miis showing up on my team in Wii Baseball, but one of the main reasons why I came back to a game like Wii Play so often was because of the Find Mii game mode. In this minigame, you have to search for lookalikes and odd Miis in the crowd, and it's okay if you have to use the default Miis, but using your own Miis made this game super fun to me. It made it a lot easier to recognize the Miis too, so it definitely added an extra layer of fun and replayability to a game that otherwise didn't have a whole lot else going for it. Anyway, back to the Mii Maker. Going into the Wii U and 3DS era, we'd get to see a newer version of the Mii Maker with quite a few more customization options to pick from. Among the new additions is the camera, allowing you to take a picture of yourself and have your 3DS or Wii U generate a Mii based on it. At least it was kind of ambitious. I don't think anyone has ever gotten an accurate Mii face to come out of the camera option. Most pictures I've seen or taken just look ridiculous. Although that did make it all the more funny when people started taking pictures of random objects or other things just to see what the console would throw back at you. Otherwise though, I'm never relying on the camera function. I've always seen the point of Miis to be an exaggerated, sorta cartoony version of yourself, and I think a lot of people enjoy making or having avatars of themselves made like that. I mean, just look at most gaming review channels these days. I'm sure some of you probably feel differently than I do, but we can at least agree that the camera function sucks, right? I was sorta let down by the Mii Maker being simplified a bit on 3DS and Wii U though. It wasn't anything huge, but they did remove the Mii Parade, which despite how pointless it is, it added a bit of personality and charm, and I kinda miss it for that. But that's really nothing compared to how dystopian the Switch's Mii Maker feels. Dude, what happened here? The classic Mii Maker music is gone, there's no main menu showing you all of your Miis interacting with each other. I mean, the Wii U Mii Maker didn't have much of one either, but the home menu screen still showed a ton of Miis walking around and interacting with each other, which was always pretty cute. Meanwhile, the Switch's Mii Maker is hidden away in the settings menu. It's like they don't even want you to know it's there. It's kind of bizarre. If Nintendo wants to stop shop, including the main menu or the Mii Parade, then fine, but removing customization options or the classic Mii Maker music, that's a cardinal sin. We can get more into the Switch's handling of the Miis later in the video, but the differences in its Mii Maker implementation and contents just grind my gears a little bit. In terms of game-specific appearances on the Wii series was where they got most of the spotlight, but you could also play as them in certain other titles like Mario Kart Wii, Mario Party 8, or Deal or No Deal? Okay, honestly though, who the heck is really gonna buy freaking Deal or No Deal on their Wii anyway? I don't even know why I find the existence of this game so funny, but it's so pointless. Someone's grandma is definitely going to be mad at me for calling Deal or No Deal for the Nintendo Wii pointless, but honestly, I'm ready for it. Come at me. We can duke it out. Moving over to the 3DS and Wii U, they saw more prominent appearances once again, not only in 2 more Wii series games, but the 3DS got a few of its own Mii-centric titles. I don't see many people talk about it these days, but the 3DS got the Streetpass Plaza, which was a hub for a bunch of Mii games. For those who don't remember it, the 3DS came with a new function called Streetpass, which you could enable in various different titles, and if you passed by someone else who had a 3DS while both of your 3DSs were turned on, your 3DS would Street Pass with theirs, which basically means that certain Street Pass specific elements in the games that that person happened to also play would activate. But no matter what games they had Street Pass active in, you were guaranteed to have their Mii show up in your Street Pass Plaza. If you had Miis in your Plaza, you could use them to play a few specific games that the Plaza housed. I don't know why I'm talking about this in the past tense, since you can actually still run into other people in Street Pass with them, since it's not tied to an online service as far as I know, but obviously it's not nearly as common as it would have been in the 3DS's heyday. Speaking of that, it was always super cool for me to hear about people's experiences going to video game conventions and leaving their 3DS's turned on in their pockets so that they could Street Pass with others while they're walking around, and you would not believe how many people you could Street Pass with. You don't get anything quite like that with the Switch, and I still kinda miss it. That might make it sound like you can't play Street Pass games anymore. You still can, but only if you have enough play coins, which you get by building up steps from walking around with your 3DS in your pocket. And even then, in some of the games, you just get these generic bunny characters visiting your plaza instead of Miis, which was a little bit lame. But you're probably more interested in the actual Street Pass games, which were okay, I guess. At some point in the middle of the 3DS's lifespan, Nintendo added a bunch of new games to the lineup, and I don't remember exactly, but I think they were free, though they added even more later on that were paid, and honestly, not really that worth it. However, I still think some of the games are pretty cool, and I wish Nintendo would expand on certain of the games, like that stock market game, that could make for a decently entertaining eShop title if fleshed out properly. But the earlier games like the Flower Town game, Zombie game, and the Find Me games are definitely my favorites. Especially the Zombie game, which was a surprisingly competent top-down action game with decent levels, a lot of unique weapons and enemy types, and an alright story, and even fun and creative bosses. Genuinely, I would love to see this re-released on Switch. I really enjoyed this one from start to finish, as it felt the most like an actual game, apart from the 2D space shooter one, and without all of the Street Pass limitations, I think it would be a really good game. That is one thing that did kinda get on my nerves about the Streetpass Mii Plaza. If you played a game with the Miis currently active in your plaza, you weren't able to play the game again until you brought in a whole new group of Miis, and each game worked a little bit differently, so you would be able to play some games for a little bit longer and others for barely any time at all. Like the Flower game, you were barely able to play it most of the time for like 3 seconds. Meanwhile, the shoot 'em up game and the Zombie game give you a fair amount of playtime with each of their levels. To be fair though, Flower Town does have some extra stuff to do after the Street Pass interaction ends. Ironically, the biggest downside to these games is the entire gimmick of the Streetpass Mii Plaza. Although I doubt it'll ever happen, if Nintendo bundled all of these games together or sold them individually and removed those Street Pass limitations in each of them, I would genuinely want to finish more of them. I'd just like to see Nintendo revisit and expand these ideas in some form or fashion, because they gave up so quickly on the Streetpass Mii Plaza whenever it could still be implemented into the Switch or a Switch successor. I don't want to spend too long talking talking about Streetpass given I could make an entire video just on it, but with as few opportunities as I get to talk about Streetpass, I'll take any chance I can get to sneak it into a conversation. Aside from Streetpass, the 3DS also saw the release of two of its own full-on Mii games, Tomodachi Life and Miitopia. These both kinda came out of nowhere, for us in the West at least. Japanese players were already familiar with the concept of Tomodachi Life from its prior Japan exclusive game, Tomodachi Collection. It's kind of bizarre to look back on it since the DS didn't have a built-in Mii Maker, and the few games on it that did use Miis would just have you transfer them from the Wii, while Tomodachi Collection had its own game-exclusive Mii Maker. Although this other completely random personal trainer DS game also had a Mii Maker in it, which is like so weird to think about because I saw that game at Walmart for years because no one wanted to buy it, and if I knew it had a built-in Mii Maker, I probably would have gotten a huge kick out of it. Now, I won't be talking about Tomodachi Collection in this video, as its sequel Tomodachi Life isn't that much different from it as far as I can tell, and fair enough, to most people outside of Japan, this was a completely new thing, so we weren't aware of the content in Tomodachi Collection, but it's just too bad that there isn't much new content, because what's here is honestly nothing of note. Tomodachi Life is a neat idea, allowing you to add multiple different Miis of yourself, friends, family, or again, just speedrun making a Peter Griffin Mii for the 5th time today, then watch your Miis occasionally interact with each other, and that's about it. Now, don't get me wrong, this game can be fairly entertaining for the first 2 or 3 weeks, but the problem I have is that the only interesting parts of the game are the drama aspects. Which Mii is gonna fall in love, and with who? What if that Mii denies them? And after all that you gotta look forward to is Mii marriages, and then children, and that's it. By then, you've most likely already seen 90% of the events in the game, whether it be a breakup, friends getting into a fight, married couples divorcing each other, you know, the usual. There are some pretty funny dreams like that stupid superhero dream, but that doesn't stop the rest of the game from quickly becoming a repetitive cycle of constant stupidity that never feels like it's going anywhere because after a while, I found myself only playing the game if that little heart icon indicating a love interest showed up in a Mii's window because that's all that I found interesting. Tomodachi Life is a disappointingly shallow game. What could have been a pretty big time sink equivalent to that of Animal Crossing ended up as one of the weaker titles on the 3DS, and it's a shame because I think there's a lot of potential for the idea, but the lack of events and generally things to do makes the game become stale fairly quickly. I'd love to see them revisit Tomodachi Life on Switch, but there would need to be a pretty significant number of changes and additions to ensure the game's longevity, but considering Nintendo's modern business practices, I don't think we'll be seeing that happen anytime soon. That leads me into what I think Tomodachi Life should have been combined with, the second and last major Mii game to be released on 3DS, Miitopia. Miitopia is an RPG that by all means I should find tedious and boring, but there's a few key factors in what made Miitopia a lot more engaging for me, which I'll go over in a minute. Miitopia follows your Mii, or whatever abomination you want to use as a protagonist, fighting against the Dark Lord who's stealing the faces of innocent Miis to give life to the land of Miitopia's monsters. The thing is, you get to choose who the NPCs are. Dark Lord Doug Walker? No, please don't remember it so I don't have to! This applies to most NPCs in the game, and what made it a really different experience from anything else Nintendo had put out at the time was that you could choose to have Miis that were made by other players be cast into the roles of the NPCs, which was by far the best feature in the game. Not knowing which Miis you would see next and in what roles was hilarious. Obviously your experiences might vary greatly from my own, but it was easily one of my favorite games on the 3DS. Of course, that's not all there is to the game though. On your quest to save Miitopia, you'll battle several enemies and bosses, and this is unfortunately a weaker aspect of the game. What makes Miitopia's battle system different from most other RPGs is that you can only control your own Mii's action, for the most part. There's another aspect to the game that can determine how battles go, which are the personalities. When you recruit a new party member, you get to choose one of 7 personalities for them, and each one can at any time give off a random effect. Cautious teammates will often step back for a moment to charge up their next attack, while airheaded teammates will disregard every rule of thumb for safety, lowering the enemy's guard and thus dealing more damage. There are a lot more effects than just these, but these add a lot to the battle system. And not just that, but also character interactions. Some personalities can help other Miis, like if one teammate is about to die and another teammate has a kind personality, they have a chance of jumping in at the last second to take the hit for them. I've always found the character interactions in this game to be particularly funny, especially since I generally have a few random Miis on my team, like Peter Griffin, so seeing them angry always makes me chuckle. But just trust me on this, you do not want to see Peter Griffin's bad side. While the battle system is fun enough, I can see where this would get fairly repetitive quickly for some, because ultimately there's not a whole lot of strategizing to be had here, as most battles boil down to using the same one or two skills, spamming sprinkles, rinse and repeat. To an extent, I understand what they were going for in not allowing you to control your other teammates, but that's a large reason for why every battle feels fairly samey. Personally, this wasn't a huge bother because the rest of the game kinda carried it for me, and honestly I'm not sure why, because looking back on it, Miitopia doesn't have a whole lot going for it. It's about as simple as an RPG can get, but for some reason the main story progression, as simple as it was enough for me to stay invested. The first world of the game is great because of how attached it can make you get to your new party members, only to finish that world, move on to the next, and have your friends taken by the Dark Lord in the middle of the night. I've heard some people say that the first world is the best part of the game, but I enjoyed pretty much every world other than the jungle area and the post-game city world. I just really like that the game forces you to meet new party members to replace your old ones, allowing you the opportunity to use some of the other classes in the game. I liked all of the classes except for the Pop Star, Flower, and Thief, since they're all pretty much the same idea, except one is primarily a healer, albeit the worst one in the game. One pretty big complaint I have with the game though is that I think it's a little too drawn out. If the first half of the game didn't make you want to tap out due to the repetitive battle system, then the next half might be what gets you. Although I love the finale of Miitopia. I won't spoil anything, but it's got a killer final boss theme. Despite my many issues with Miitopia, I couldn't help but love it. It's just so charming and fun to me, even though I know it shouldn't be, but honestly, I could not be asked to care. I loved it from start to finish, so when I heard it was getting an updated Switch release, I was very excited to revisit it. Until, they kinda ruined it. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but Miitopia's Switch port made a couple of notable changes and additions, like Mr. Haunts here. I like this guy. One of the biggest additions, though, is the new makeup for Miis. Now, upon hearing that, you might not think much, but the extra customization Miis gain for the makeup is honestly incredible. The internet went wild with this, creating incredibly accurate Miis of basically anything you can think of. Chris Deltarune, Bowser, Ed, and Eddie, the Among Us imposter? Literally, what else could you ask for? It's kinda sad we had to live with these Miis for so long. Unfortunately, the makeup stuff is exclusive to Miitopia's Mii Maker, but it was still incredibly cool regardless to see what people made with the new Mii Maker. The other much more egregious change though is that you can't have random Miis from the internet be cast into the roles of the NPCs you run into, which was half of the fun of the original game. I can only assume this was Nintendo's way of protecting the kids from the profane Miis, but I never ran into anything particularly inappropriate in my playthrough on the 3DS, nor have I heard of anything similar. Maybe someone else had a worse experience, I can't say for sure, but this was a huge loss for the game. You could still choose Miis made by other players for your NPCs, but not randomly. You have to choose them individually, which really sucked. I still enjoyed my time with the Miitopia Switch release, but honestly, if you want the best experience in that regard, I'd recommend going with the 3DS version, because the only major thing you'd be missing out on is the horse, which Mr. Haunts here is pretty cool, but I don't think he's worth getting the Switch version and missing out on all the random NPCs. Going back to what I was saying earlier about Tomodachi Life being combined with Miitopia though, I really do mean that. I'd love to see a game that takes the life sim aspects of Tomodachi Life and combines it with the RPG elements of Miitopia. There's quite a bit that could be done here beyond the basic relationship system in Miitopia, and I think this would give fans of either game the best of both worlds. And I I'm sure there are other RPGs out there like this, but I'd just love to see a Mii game where you have a town you can continuously grow by exploring a vast world with a team of Miis, hunting for materials, fighting big bosses, and after all that excitement, just chilling out at the theater singing the stupidest songs anyone could ever come up with. There's plenty other ways to execute an RPG with life sim elements, but that just sounds the most enjoyable to me, although this is yet another idea I highly doubt Nintendo will ever consider, but hey, a man can dream. That's all I ever have these days. For our last stop on this Mii reflection journey, we have the Nintendo Switch. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I feel like Nintendo may be slowly trying to distance themselves from the Miis. The lack of titles Miis are even playable in, the fact that the Mii Maker is hidden, and that even Switch Sports, the Wii Sports follow-up, doesn't use Miis at the forefront of the cover, just had me a little bit worried that Nintendo might be slowly phasing them out. With Switch Sports in particular, I still don't understand why they're using these weird avatars as the mascots of the game. Besides the fact that they greatly disturb me, they all look the same to me. Mii's always stood out to me because of all of the customization they gave you. Lots of hair, facial structure, eyes, and mouth options among other things make Mii's much more memorable to me. Without the usernames next to the avatars I see in Switch Sports, I don't think I'd even be able to recognize any avatars separately. That's primarily why they don't sit right with me. Now, I don't think Nintendo is going to start using Sportsmates as the new console avatars, but it did get me thinking more about the Miis, and I don't know, as someone who grew up with the Wii primarily, I do have a lot of nostalgia for the Miis. These funny little dudes mean a lot to me. I don't think about them as often as I used to, but I still love them, and I think they fit Nintendo's brand really well, as they were always a symbol of creativity and fun and even the most simple things. Something that was synonymous with Nintendo. That simple charm that every Nintendo game had. Even though it's not that big of a deal realistically, it would kind of hurt to lose that for future Nintendo consoles. Even if we never get another Mii game, that'll be a little sad, but I'll be fine as long as we still have our funny little Miis playable in Mario Kart or whatever other party games. Ultimately, if I'm being realistic, I don't see Nintendo getting rid of Miis anytime soon, simply because of how they've been handled more recently. I mean, we did get Miitopia on Switch, which has some pretty insane capabilities with its makeup system. I really hope someone at Nintendo caught wind of the response to Mii Makeup Online, because that's a change to Mii's I would love to see, making the makeup a staple feature of the Switch's built-in Mii Maker. Like, that just seems like a perfect progression of Mii's in general. The idea that Nintendo would ever phase the Miis out is what prompted me to make this video, and I've never reflected on the Miis like this before, but that's what made this video a lot different and a really fun break from what I usually make, allowing me to talk about a lot of things that I otherwise probably never would have been able to, like Streetpass. Whatever happens with the Miis in the future, I know that I'll always have my memories and those old 3DS, Wii, and Wii U games to look back on. They came to mean a lot more to me later on, even though they may have just been simple avatars, but they were so much more to me than that. To me, the Miis will always be a secondary mascot for Nintendo, even if they're not as prominent as they used to be.
Make your Mii, then play it on Wii.